What is going on, OWS fam, props fam? Welcome to the week 5. I almost said week 6. Well, I don't know where my head's at. Welcome to the week 5 edition of Props Talk. I'm your host, JMtoWin. Here with my man, Jreasy. Reezy, how we doing, bro?
Yeah, man, doing great. On to week 5. We got football in the air. We got NHL playoff. NHL starting to come back. We got baseball playoffs. October is one of those months of sports that just can't be beat.
Yeah, I'm with you. I was actually texting with a buddy a couple of days ago, and he was saying he hadn't watched any Red Sox games since 2018. He and I used to watch games together. Now I also stopped watching after 2018 because that was the year I started the site, and I was working 90 hours a week, and that was back when baseball games were 4.5 hours long. Red Sox Dodgers World Series, and they thought Corum was stealing pitches, which he probably was, and they were like changing signs between every pitch. I was like, I don't have the time for this anymore. Red Sox let Mookie Betts go that offseason. I was like, all right, I'm cold turkey. I'm done with the baseball. But yeah, my son and I went to a Red Sox game at Fenway this year, and so kind of keeping up with these playoffs and getting back into those baseball streets. We got NBA coming up, NHL coming up, NBA props coming up, which is exciting.
Yeah,
so yeah, man, it's a good time. It's busy time, but it's a good time. So I guess you and I already did this before we came on air, but this is the part of the show where we're going to talk a little bit about last week, what I called the hand of God coming down and saying, not this week, OWS, but yeah, talk a little bit about talk a little bit about last week, because I think it's important to talk about the difference between not liking your results and not liking your picks or your process, right? There was 2 weeks ago where there were a couple things where you were like, yeah, like we realized we should have done this differently and this differently. There's a difference between having a down week where that's the takeaway and a down week where it's like, oh, we ran cold. So yeah, what about week 4? What do we have coming out of that one?
Yeah, I mean, we ran cold, the hand of God week. Tough week 4, just near misses everywhere, resulting we lost about 3 units. But we're gonna get back into the positive this week. We just have to be able to find these game scripts that go in our direction, where we cannot find a game script to save our lives over the first 4 weeks, but they are coming. These things come in waves. While the record isn't great yet, we felt genuinely happy at the vast majority of all our bets going into game time. We've had 3 bets that I would consider over the last 4 weeks that, maybe by the time it came out that maybe we wish we had something back, but we feel really good about our process and what is getting out to subscribers. So we're seeing a lot of organic closing line value, and that's movement that happens in like the hours and the days after we bet. So that's a lot more valuable to us as a measuring stick than like the immediate moves that we get right after we put out a bet. Or even the result. It means that the ecosystem outside of OWS is in agreement with us, and that's really what we're looking for. But if we look back to last week, we had things like a Jalen Hurts over 26.5 pass attempts, where he went 15 for 16 in the first half before going 0 for 8 in the second half. We had an opening drive punt blocked by the Philadelphia defense that robbed us of a possession, and it turned the game script just against us just right away. We ended up losing that bet, but we felt really good seeing those 16 first half passing attempts gets us to 32. And it just kind of signals that we were on the right track, that, Philadelphia understood that they needed to start throwing the ball and couldn't play, this very vanilla run-based offense. After being up 24-6, I think at half, they had 0 completions and they held on for a 6-point win. First half definitely went a lot better than the second half. We also took what is going to be our toughest loss of the season, an under 6.5 receptions prop on Jake Ferguson, and he beat us on 7 targets. We feel really strongly that he didn't deserve that 6.5 line, and we've said that this is reserved for guys like CeeDee Lamb, and just because CeeDee Lamb isn't there doesn't mean that Jake Ferguson just starts seeing 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 targets. And we were right. He only saw the 7. It's such a tough run out in a 40-40 OT game, and we will not lose very many under 6.5 receptions bets on those 7 targets. That's just so rare. We had the Mahomes bet. We thought that was great because
that was brutal. That one was close to my heart because I was the one who found that bet. And 4.5 rush attempts.
Man, it's just one of those things where we feel like that's one of those bets we really like. That's a little bit game script independent, and we still found a game script in a game that both teams needed to win. This was important to both. And we found that game script where Mahomes just wasn't there at the end. We thought that if they were trailing, Mahomes would keep the ball in his hands more and get more kind of real rushes. But if they were winning, that we would have that kneel equity at the end of the game. And unfortunately, those two I think kneeled in. Yeah, we only needed 1, but they had 2. Those went to Carson Wentz after the Ravens conceded. To project a game script where either of the backup quarterbacks were going to play in that game, let alone both getting action, a must-win game for both these teams. That's just really hard. But, as they say, we're on the week 5. So I'll get DraftKings put up here. And Jam, if you have anything to add there, just, let me know.
Yeah, I mean, I think this process over results thing is critical, right? Because it's one thing to props is different because it's not asymmetric payouts like DFS. So it's easier to kind of track that process. But I look at my DFS, right? And I was thinking, I go on my Friday shows every week, and Squirrel Patrol always asks, how was your week? He'll ask this week, how was your week 4, right? So I took down second place in the face mask in week 4 for a 20K payout. But how was my week 4? It was literally the exact same as my week 3, where I had my lowest ROI of the season. And week 3, I had a roster that was probably the favorite heading into like the early fourth quarter of the late games. It was the favorite to take down the double spy, and it ended up finishing like 16th or 17th because I didn't get the run out, And so it was like, we just need that one roster that can finish up near the top. That one roster did finish up near the top in week 4. That roster didn't finish up near the top in week 3, but it was basically the exact same week, just with a different run out, And so being able to take those and say, yeah, it was a good week for me in DFS in week 4, it didn't mean I played better than I did in previous weeks. It was just the way that the run out came. And so, to be able to explore this and really the ones that stood out to me, I mean, even you and I talked about the Saints one where we took 0.75 units on overs on Olave, Shaheed, and Juwan Johnson. They were 9-0 on the season to the over on those. And what happens? They go 1-2 to the over in week 4 in a game where they were trailing. And, we said before the show, it was like, yeah, like you're going to attack Buffalo more on the ground, but they've been very pass heavy, and it's a game script where you're going to be trailing. And so you expect those passes, and those passes are going to those 3 guys. And so, and then, like you said, the Ferguson 7 catches on 7 targets. Nick Chubb was another one where we took the under on rush attempts, and we barely kept that one, even though Woody Marks did have the impact that we expected him to have. And so, yeah, just a weird week. But I think the important thing is to not overreact to a weird week and to be able to separate results from how we attack things. And so this was a week where, it was very much like, oh, well, I like the way that we attack things. And so keep that process going, because in the same way that, week 1, we were 5-2, something like that. Like there's going to be other weeks like that where all the variance swings our way. And so, that's what we're trying to position for this week. And we will talk today about 3 bets that we've taken in the props channel. Some of them are still viable, some of them are not. And then a couple alt lines. And if you're new here, this really just gives us an opportunity to talk thought processes and how we're thinking about things, how we're attacking bets, what we're looking for. So whether you're a props insider member or not, this is an opportunity for you to be able to say, how do I think through props on my own end and think about where the edges are. So we've also seen, as we get closer to Sunday, right, Josh, as we get closer to Sunday, we'll get more bets available and maybe more edges that'll start to pop up. Books have started waiting on releasing some of this stuff. They'll release the passing. They'll release the production stats before the usage stats, right? So they'll release the rushing yards and the passing yards, which are a little bit higher variance, and let the betting market kind of figure out for them, hey, is this a little too high? Is this a little too low? Before they go out and set those attempts and passing attempts, rushing attempts, stuff like that. And then also, like, we're going to get into this, right? Like you and I, 2 of these first 3 bets we're going to talk about are backup running backs or number 2 running backs, right? So it kind of shows where we're needing to look for edges here. But yeah, so I'll throw it over to you for this first bet and let you talk through what we're looking at on this one.
Yeah, man, we're going to start on the Thursday night game. We love to get a prop out here on this Thursday night for our live listeners, and we found one that, we really liked. It's already moved up a couple yards, but our own Mike Johnson, rolled into the prop streets maybe 30 minutes ago, and he actually said that 32.5 was, one of his bets that he really liked it. So still some meat on the bone there, but we got Blake Corum over 27.5 rushing yards on Tuesday night. And since then, it's moved 5 yards in our favor. And that's more with the confirmation of Brock Purdy, Juwan Jennings, and Ricky Pearsall. They all got ruled out. So the tea leaves were kind of already leading us to that outcome. But it just kind of shows that if you're willing to take, a stand on these injury reports earlier in the week, before all the information is widely available, you can create some additional edge that you can't make up in DFS, right? Everybody knows all the injury statuses by Sunday, but if you're ahead of the game here, you can kind of get those 5 yards. So the Rams are 8.5-point favorites here at home with a 43.5-point total. After week 2, we had Sean McVay tell the media that a 70%, 30% split of the running back snaps was more in line with how he envisioned that backfield here in 2025. And he backed that up with snap shares of 74-24 and 69-29 in weeks 3 and 4. So in week 4, the rush attempts were split 13-9 between Williams and Blake Corum here, but After 3 quarters, they were split at 9 each. And while the scoreboard may show that the Rams won 27-20, they were down 10 points, I think, with 9 minutes and change left in the fourth quarter. They scored two touchdowns late to get the win there. So the fourth quarter game script really did favor Williams more than Blake Corum. But through 3 quarters there, it was 9 rushing attempts each. In that more positive run game script, which, the books are letting us know with the 8.5 point spread here that they, and we things coming. So by week here, we have Corum's rush share. It's grown every week. Week 1 was 5.2%. That's when McVay came out and said, hey, this isn't what I want. I want to get that, these snap shares a little bit closer to 70-30. And again, that's a snap share. That's not necessarily a rush share. We actually think there's a little bit more room to grow there. Week 1, Blake Corum, 5%. Week 2, 22%. Week 3, 28%. And then last week, week 4, he had a 41% rush share. So, he is picking up rushing attempts, even if he isn't, closing that gap huge in the total snaps. The rushing attempts are coming closer between these two backs. Because this could be a really ugly game, let's be honest, for a Thursday night here. Jam, do you see a chance for a bigger role tonight for Blake Corum, or do you think it will be a little bit more, tight-nipped on the short week with Kendre Williams getting a little bit more, as he has in the past?
Yeah, no, I mean, I actually think, if anything, this tilts even more toward Corum because you've got Kendre Williams, on a short week, and he's your lead back. If anything, if you've got the game in control, you want to kind of give that to that 1B a little bit more. And yeah, it's funny, if we were judging our ROI just based off closing line value, we would be smashing this season, right? Where it's like, we're getting these bets early, and you guys do such a tremendous job of being on the books, like as soon as these bets are released, right? So like we had the Spencer Rattler over 30.5 that moved up to 32.5 pass attempts earlier in the year. We've had several things like that where we've had really significant movement in the number, whether it's the actual odds of the bet or the actual number of the bet, right? So to move, again, there's the injuries and whatnot, but to move from 27.5 rushing yards up to 32.5, where that's the bet people are having to take now, and it's still a good bet, right? We're getting this 27.5. So Corum, to me, like Kendre Williams does such a good job, like following his blocks, getting skinny through the hole, good vision. He's a really great runner. But in terms of just like raw running, I think Corum's an even better running back. He's got this speed, this burst, right? And so he's a great complement to Kendre Williams. Kendre Williams is a better all-around back. And obviously, we see the snap share isn't even matching up exactly with the rushing share because Kendre Williams is such a good pass blocker. He's so good in all phases of the game. But they're getting Blake Corum on the field to take some of that load off of Kendre Williams' body. This is a team that realistically should be 4-0, right? They should have won that game against the Eagles. They kind of blew that game against the Eagles. And they have Super Bowl aspirations. They're going to have a long season more than likely. And so keeping these guys fresh and healthy is also a big part of things. So, no, I really like this bet on Blake Corum. And I think this is the guy that they're going to continue to try to get involved. And it's one thing when you look at the box score and it's like, oh, yeah, this guy's getting more work. It's another thing when you look at the game and it's like, oh, this guy actually looks really good, right? And that's what we have in this spot. So, I think kind of digging down to the second layer and getting this 1B back in this spot. And then we get the run out with the injuries for the 49ers. Just a really nice setup here. And I was really excited about this game for real life purposes before the injuries, where it got a little bit uglier now. 49ers might play this game close because they're just a good team, but definitely plays in the Rams' favor and a good spot for the Rams to get some extra rushing output here, extra rushing attempts, extra rushing yards. Blake Corum over 27.5 seems like something that we're going to get a pretty high percentage of the time in this spot.
Yeah, and surprisingly, Corum actually, as you kind of mentioned there, that he is the more explosive runner, and he's leading on the season with a 5.2 yards per carry for Corum, and Williams, still doing great, 4.5 yards per carry, but it just kind of shows us that if the opportunity does present itself, which we do think that it will tonight, that Corum's up for the task, right? We're looking for 8, 9, 10 carries. He's had 8 and 9 over his last 2 games. We just feel that if this game script is one that we get, and even if not, that there is room on the bone here for Corum to, have this higher yards per carry and a good run scheme versus, a San Francisco defense that's given up 4 yards per carry versus a lot lesser rushing attacks than the Rams are.
Yeah, 100%. Like this spot, looking forward to this game tonight. And like you said, always nice to get a Thursday night bet that we can talk about here, but also that we can get out early to props insider users, especially with this closing line value. Really nice one this week. All right, so we're going to stick with these, I don't want to say backup running backs, but these kind of 1B running backs on this second bet. Josh, why don't you talk to us about what we have on this second bet?
Yeah, I'd say it's a 1B running back, but somebody that's definitely taken over a lot more off of the rushing share than we would have thought at the beginning of the season. A lot of that may become, maybe because of a new coach. And sometimes you get out of the doghouse and everything just kind of, clicks for you. But we're going to go to the Superdome, where the Saints are hosting the New York Giants as 1.5-point favorites with a 42.5-point total. We've been looking mainly at how new head coach Kellen Moore has been impacting the Saints offense. He's trying to find ways to win with less talent. And it seems like Moore may think that Kendre Miller is deserving a bigger role. So we took Miller over 26.5 rushing yards after Miller received 5, 7, and 11 carries over the last 3 weeks. Looking at just the last 2 weeks, Kamara still has the lead in the backfield. We're not saying that this is, Miller's backfield now. Kamara still leads with 33 rushing attempts to Miller's 18, but Miller's looked better as a runner. Miller's averaged 5.1 yards per carry over the last 2 games compared to Kamara's just 3.4 over that same time period. Miller has had a higher percentage of carries go for 1 yard, 3 yards, 5 yards, 10 yards, you name it. So it isn't a case of one big run kind of skewing this small sample size in his favor. Neither have had very many carries inside the 10 or 5 with how bad the offense has been, but Miller does lead, that as well, 2-0 in rushing attempts inside the 10 in the last 2 games. Well, Kellen Moore opened the season with a positive PROE, pass rate over expectation. That signified that maybe he would prefer to have his offense operate through the air. But we do know that he's an elite play caller, and it does appear as though he's kind of adapted to the lack of, quarterback talent for the first time in his coaching career. Over the last 3 weeks, the Saints have been a negative PROE team in all 3 weeks. Week 2, -6%. Week 3, -4%. And week 4, -12%. So last week versus Buffalo, not a good time to be having 3 wide receivers overs when, your PROE is -12%. So that may just be, we are giving Kellen Moore some credit here, but that may just be a game that he understands that his quarterback, who I think is 0-9 or 0-10 at this point, he can't win that game. So let's just try to get it out and be respectable versus, letting him go a game, everybody's watching the Bills, and instead of letting them go out there and just kind of get embarrassed, they kept it pretty close. I think the Saints were probably happy with the results there, but overall their PROE ranks 29th and is on the season is -4.5%. So Jam, are we seeing a situation here where we might need to adapt to the Saints becoming a higher paced running team? And what do you think the Saints will do with Alvin Kamara going forward if they are going to continue increasing Kendre Miller's workload? AK seen his pass game role basically disappear, career lows. I think he had 4 catches for 2 or 3 yards last week, and I think he's we were talking about these backup running backs. I think Alvin Kamara is a prime trade candidate going forward.
Yeah, so there's a lot going on here. I think that Kellen Moore is probably pretty game plan specific in the way that he's looking at things, and so looking at the Bills last week, that's a spot where teams have been attacking them on the ground, where you can kind of out physical them. And where we talked about this heading into last week, but the way that the Saints have been passing is kind of this short area passing. They've been using that as an extension of the run game. And the Bills are typically comfortable allowing teams to do that. But the Bills are also very opponent specific in the way that they design their defense. And so they can take away whatever they want to take away and sort of force you to win in a different way through the air. And it seems like the Saints last week were just kind of like, you know what, like we can do well on the ground in this spot. Well, this week we have sort of a similar setup where we're not scared about the Giants secondary or even their linebackers, but their front 4 is ferocious, and the Saints don't have the best offensive line in football. And so, and then the Giants have been one of the worst run defenses in the NFL to date. So this makes sense, especially at home, in a spot where the Saints are favored and, 1.5 point favorites. They don't have a win yet. They haven't led in a game yet this year. It makes sense as a spot where they would be skewing a little bit more run heavy again. And then, Alvin Kamara, there's a lot going on below the surface. I think it's a 7.6% first read target rate, if I remember correctly, which is the lowest that we've seen from him in his career. And it's just not the same weapon deployment that we've seen for Kamara in the past, right? Where Kellen Moore's coming in and it's like the skill set of somebody like Spencer Rattler, who's going to take off and scramble sometimes. And he's not going to throw a lot of downfield throws. So they're really using their wide receivers in this short and like short intermediate area, right? Like the just barely over 10 yards and the 10 yards and below. And so why put Kamara out on a bunch of routes, 1, 2, 3 yards downfield when that's also how you're using your wide receivers, how you're using your tight end. And so that sort of de-emphasized him in this passing attack. And I like what you said also about realistically, you're building for the future here. If you're Kellen Moore, if you're the Saints, Kendre Miller, a guy who has a lot of talent, was obviously in Dennis Allen's doghouse throughout that entire tenure and has looked good. You mentioned 5 yards per carry, 7 attempts a couple weeks ago, 11 attempts last week. Well, both of those would keep you on pace for more than 26.5 rushing yards. And so the variance inherent in something like this, where you are betting on a guy being efficient on 7, 8, 9, 10 carries, because I don't think that we're expecting a full changing of the guard anytime soon, or especially not necessarily this week, where it's like, hey, all of a sudden Kendre Miller's getting 14 carries, 15 carries. If you think that, you can go out and bet the alt line on this. So this is inherently a little bit higher variance, because it's like, yeah, he might only get 8 or 9 carries. If we could play out this game 100 times, he's going to finish to the over, well over like a positive payout like rate, because he's going to average these 4.5, 5 yards a carry. He's looked really good this year. It's a good matchup. In the small sample size of 1 week, he could see 8 carries and end up with 22 yards, because those carries just happen to not go anywhere. And it's Kamara's carries that end up getting the yards. But I think this is a really sharp one in terms of when we look through the lens of what makes us the most money over time. Really liked both of these ones that we dropped in here so far with Blake Corum and Kendre Miller. And, there was I forget where I saw this earlier today, but it was like just a breakdown of some of the things that were, it was in our Angles email that Larejo wrote. And it was a breakdown of like some of the stats from the first 4 weeks of last season. And it was all these crazy stats of like where different players ranked in the NFL at different positions and what their production had been, and like how silly that looked in retrospect, right? It's easy to forget that 4 weeks of the season is still like the fact-finding mode for NFL teams. And there are going to be a lot of changes over the next 4 to 6 weeks in terms of how teams are using players. So if anything, Kendre Miller is going to be getting more work, not less work. And same thing with Blake Corum on a team where, yes, it's not like we have Kendre Williams as an aging veteran who's not with the same coaching staff as before, but we do have a 1B back who is playing really well, and it makes sense for them to continue expanding his role. And then especially Kendre Miller, where he's likelier to be the future here than Alvin Kamara. And so it makes sense for them to continue expanding his role throughout the season. So I think we're getting really good value on both of these so far. And like this one, I mean, I like the Saints as the favorite in this game. I don't do a lot of betting, but this is one where I drop down some money on the Saints to win this game. Nice. Bet the money line, bet the over, or bet the 1.5 as well. And I think this is a spot where the Saints can do well on offense against the Giants, and a lot of that's going to come through the ground game.
Yep, and Kamara just, it just hasn't been a season. Do you think that there is something to say that as the negative PROE has climbed, so has Kendre Miller's role? Is there a chance that instead of, because to be able to trade Alvin Kamara, you do need for him to produce. You need him to still have a role. And as you mentioned, if it's not going to be in the receiving game, they still do need to use him in the rushing game. But if they want to use Kendre Miller as well, you need to run the ball more overall, right? It's hard to still kind of find out what you have in that backfield when you have that aging vet kind of, blocking, for lack of a better word. But, he's not doing it in the air. He's not doing it on the ground. And, we did get 11 carries, last week. So, you said, if you think 14, 15, I definitely don't think he's going to out carry Alvin Kamara here, but it does seem to be getting a lot closer. Yeah.
I mean, that was a game that they lost by 10 points, something like that. And they were trailing the entire game. And so, in a spot where they're favored and where at worst they should be competitive in this one, it certainly makes sense that he's going to see like at least those 7 or 8 carries with a shot at double-digit carries here in this spot.
Yes,
so, really like that one. All right. What do we have for our third bet this week?
We're actually going to go the other way and go with the aging veteran here. But for our third game, we're going to go to Arizona, where the Cardinals are hosting the 0-4 Tennessee Titans as 7.5-point favorites and a 41.5 point total. We're going to look at Tony Pollard under 69.5 rush yards at -114. I think it's 68. A couple of other places it's down to 65. 68 is still fine. 65 is, that's a whole nother carry. So maybe stay away from the 65, but 68, 69, we feel pretty good there. The Titans play slow. Even when they're losing, the Titans rank at or near the bottom in a lot of the offensive stats to start the season. But the big one that we're looking at here is that they have the league's lowest pace over expectation. So even when they're losing, they're not playing faster like a lot of other teams. They're just content to, mostly run out the ball, throw some screens, and just get out of there before it starts to look too bad. It's looked bad last week versus the Texans, that's for sure. And they seem like they're fine to just kind of do that. So a low time of possession plus, touchdown underdogs on the road is not a good combination for opposing running backs. When teams do have the ball against Arizona, they're choosing to throw it. They have a positive PROE against in 3 of their 4 games this season. The one time they had a negative PROE was last week versus the Seattle Seahawks. That was on a short week. Seattle has had a negative PROE as an offense in all 4 games. So they're content to just run the ball, pound the rock. I don't think that game ever got too far out of hand. And quite frankly, what they did worked. If it wasn't a kick out of bounds, I think was it a kick out of bounds or maybe short of the drop zone. But apart from that, that game probably goes to overtime. But instead, Seattle gets the short field, kicks the last second field goal to get the win. Starting running backs versus the Cardinals, and we're going to count both Walker and Sharps here since they ran so much. They've averaged 3.7 yards per carry this season. That list includes Christian McCaffrey, Alvin Kamara, Chuba Hubbard, and the Seattle duo. Pollard has averaged just 3.8 yards per carry over 4 games, so 3.7, 3.8. So it's likely that Pollard will need a full game here, full of volume to get over 70 yards. While we won't likely know if Tajay Spears, what his status is, will he be in, the starting lineup until later in the week? His window to return from the IR has opened. And he was a limited participant at practice at both Wednesday and Thursday. Just before we jumped on the show here today, I saw a couple clips of him doing some spin moves and drills. He seems to be cutting very good. So, we might get a chance where we do get Tajay Spears here, and that would have a really big negative effect on Tony Pollard. He's handled 89% of the snaps through 4 weeks. So, that would decrease his projected workload. This is a bet where we have a game script out. They're huge, 7.5, so touchdown point favorites on the road. So we have a game script out. We have an efficiency out with him just averaging 3.8 yards per carry, and we have an injury return out. So we have Tony Pollard projected in the mid 60s, so just under this line if Spears is out, but that number will drop into the low to mid 50s if we do get him active. So JM, the Tennessee offense it's been hard to watch, right? Pollard actually has the 13th most touches in the NFL, and he's produced the RB29 scoring in PPR. When Spears got injured, I think we all kind of bumped up Tony Pollard. We expected him to kind of run away with this job, but he's definitely disappointed, and he hasn't really separated himself that much. Do you see this as another letdown spot for Tony Pollard, with or without Tajay Spears?
Yeah, I mean, here's where we're gonna lose on the run out here. You ready? It's gonna be like a 2nd down and 27, and the Titans are gonna be losing by 17 points, and they're gonna be like, "Hey, let's run the ball here, right? Let's set up a 3rd and 18." And run the ball, and Tony Pollard's going to have like a nice little 9-10 yard run, put him over. No, I mean, this is, he's finished under this in 3 out of 4 games, right? And one of the things that I think is it's hard for projections, including the Vegas projections, whatever they're going to use to set these prop bets, it's hard for them to truly account for what things look like on the field, And so 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, I was seeing Tony Pollard constantly popping as one of the top options in the optimizer for DFS because it's like his projection looks good against his price tag because of how high his usage is, because of how big his role is. And I had to override the optimizer to be like, no, because this guy's not good and this offense is so bad. Like there's been no offense in the NFL, right? I've watched all the games this year. There's been no offense that has been more uninspiring than this. The Texans are a close second. And then there's a huge gap before any other offense in the NFL beyond these two. And it's just a function of like you said, the slow pace of play and the lack of aggressiveness and the lack of seeming intention towards scoring points, right? So holding penalties, false start penalties, incompletions, miscommunications, and they're constantly behind the sticks. But then when they're behind the sticks, they're not actually saying, okay, it's 2nd and 15. How do we get it to it? We know that the conversion rate on a 3rd and 6 or shorter is dramatically higher than your 3rd and 7s or 3rd and 10s or 3rd and 12s. But when they're in these 2nd and 15, 2nd and 18, 2nd and 25s, they're never trying to get it to a 3rd and short or a 3rd and manageable. They're constantly just saying, all right, well, let's run the ball here. What are you hoping happens, right? And so this is a team that can't run the ball, that's not really trying to score points, and therefore isn't sustaining drives. The Cardinals the last, whatever it's been, 2 years with Jonathan Gannon there, they've been this defense that doesn't have the talent and yet is so well coached and so well schemed that they're constantly giving problems to opposing offenses. Well, now they have the talent, right? They're starting to build that up more and more, and they're still well coached and still well schemed. They are a very difficult defense for opposing offenses to face. And you have really the worst offense in the NFL coming to face this team. And so, it's just a bad setup for Tony Pollard, even if Spears is out. And now we have a similar situation to what we talked about with the Blake Corum one where, hey, if you can take this bet early, you might get the positive run out where it's already a good bet. And then if Tajay Spears comes back, then we're going to see this line for Tony Pollard drop even more. So, I mean, with him finishing below this in 3 out of 4 games and this being as bad of a spot as he's had on the season, it's definitely one that I like a lot this week. And really excited to see how this one plays out. And again, can things break the wrong way? Absolutely. We can paint the picture of how that can happen. But if we could play out this game over and over again, this is definitely one that we'd be making money on. So really like the Pollard under. We know people don't like to bet the unders as much, and so we get some extra, probably a little bit of extra positive line there as well. And so Tony Pollard under 69.5, where we got that a really nice bet, I think, on this one.
Yeah, no, we like it. He'll have to do something that he hasn't done in the last 3 games, and we always like when we get that extra out. If the books have not decided if they think Tajay Spears is going to play yet, so they've just kind of stayed away from it. And we're going to take a stand here that, hey, if Tajay Spears does play, this is a great bet, and even if he doesn't play, this is still a good bet. Right, just getting that extra equity, and then we have the inefficiency. We have another blowout, and then we just have a team that's already decided that their head coach shouldn't call plays anymore. I think they went to the QB coach now, and then you put up 0 points and you look like you did versus the Houston Texans, and I just don't really know where you go from there. I don't know what's next, but I'm glad to see it, and hopefully it's much of the same.
Yeah, fire sale, fire the coach, start over. Something's going to happen in Tennessee. I think it's going to happen within the next few weeks. All right, so this is the part of the show where we like to almost turn on our DFS brain, turn on our asymmetric upside brain, and talk about some alt lines where we can say, you know what, yeah, this guy might only go over his prop 50% of the time, 45% of the time, maybe even 40% of the time. But if he goes over, he can go way over. And so we want to ladder up these bets, bet a fraction of a unit on each step up, each rung up the ladder, trying to make some extra money with these higher payouts that we can get. Usually we're looking for downfield threats in terms of pass catchers or game scripts where things might get kind of crazy for a running backs who can hit big plays, something like that, where the example we've used a couple times is AJ Brown. Yeah, he might only go over his prop line 45% of the time. When he does, he can go way over. So looking for some guys like that. We've got 2 guys to talk about. This first one, which is yours, was also one of mine. So I'll throw this over to you. Definitely one that I like this week. What do we have for this first one?
Yeah, our emails were sent at different times without seeing them, and we both had this one as our number one. And last week you got 2 winners with Quentin Johnson and Daniel Jones getting a couple of rungs of the ladder there. So you gave me Jamison Williams this week. He can get there on 1 or 2 plays, right? This is a guy that had 214 air yards in week 4, accounting for over 70% of the Lions' air yards last week. And he's at about 45% of the team air yards on the season. This looks like it's actually already got hit a little bit since I put this in, but I took 70 plus at 190, looks like 171 now, 80 plus at 250. And then 90 plus at 340. So you do see that just much like these regular straight props, these alt lines do get hit, throughout the week. So it is important. Again, we get rewarded in prop betting for being first, right? In DFS, you get till the Sunday, but it is important to kind of get to these lines early before you kind of lose some of the value. But I actually think that the Lions would be better off if they lowered Williams. He has an ADOT of 21.5. But, it's come with 418 air yards. That ranks 11th in the NFL. He ran a route on 93% of the team dropbacks, and Detroit had a team total of 30 points. I think that's the most on the week. Lions are an explosive offense. They've left a ton on the field to Williams. They haven't connected yet. It's still not perfect. Gone through Amon-Ra St. Brown a lot, but they're playing the Cincinnati Bengals this week. And they give up the second most explosive pass plays in the league at 5.5 per game. So I think this is a spot that Detroit Lions, they really want to get Jamison Williams going. These guys that you draft and then you give contract, you want to see them succeed. So when you get a situation like this against, the Cincinnati Bengals, they're reeling, they're having a really hard time. They give up explosive plays. I just think that this is going to be one where they're going to try a little bit extra hard to make sure that they connect on one of these big bombs here.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing about Jamison Williams. You could see him come away with 150 yards, right? So the line is whatever it is, 40-something yards. What is the line on this one again?
Yeah, I think it was 43 yards when I looked at it earlier.
Yeah, he can go so far over that. And one of the things we like about the Lions that's so unique about them compared to most teams in the NFL is they don't need the game script to line up in order for them to hit these big plays, in order for them to stay aggressive. Like, will Goff throw the ball 38 times if the Lions are handling this game? No, but we've seen these games where the Lions score 50-something points and Goff's thrown it 28 times, 30 times, whatever it is. And this very much lines up as a week like that. And there's this outside chance, right? Like Jake Browning 2 years ago when he was starting, he was consistently keeping the Bengals in games. They were a competitive offense. They've played two very difficult defenses, not to say that the Lions are any sort of pushover, but there is a world in which the Bengals actually keep this close. And then the Lions are kind of forced to stay aggressive throughout the game against a defense that they'll have no troubles with. And then what's likelier is that the Lions eventually gain control of this game and remain aggressive, trying to score as many points as they can. Like, the Lions are not a team, and this was, there were eras of the Patriots that were like this too, where the thinking was like, every time we step on the field, it's an opportunity to get better, right? We expect our season to go deep into January, hopefully into February. We understand that we need to have those incremental improvements because every team's getting better. If we can get a little bit better than those other teams, we're in that little bit better shape when we get to those playoff games. And so the Lions don't have these big leads early in the third quarter and say, all right, let's wrap things up. Let's protect against injury. This is an aggressive team that stays aggressive deep into the game. And so, I think that there's a little bit of narrative here in terms of, if you are the Lions, what do you focus on here? Well, probably try to focus on getting Jamison Williams going. That was the same thought process I had in week 2 in DFS, where yes, he only caught 2 passes, but it was 2 passes for 108 yards in that game against Chicago, where it was like, all right, they're going to have an easy time against Chicago. What are they going to focus on? They're probably going to focus on trying to get Jamison Williams going. They were able to hit a couple of those plays in that game. And so, this is one where maybe you don't hit the over 50% of the time. Maybe it's a little bit under 50% of the time, but when you hit typically way over. And so, just the nature of how Jamison Williams is used, I'm not surprised to see that these alt lines have already been getting hit, that the odds have been coming down, less favorably for us since we were able to hit these early. And I think these will keep coming down because this is the type of alt line, the type of ladder that you really want to go out of your way to hit, where you have this ADOT over 20, right? Where the average throw to this guy is more than 20 yards downfield. And you get 4, 5, 6 targets. Those can pile up. Like you said, over 240 air yards last. I mean, it's ridiculous, right? The number of air yards he's getting when he gets targets. So, really like the spot for Jamison Williams. And then, mine is kind of a similar style of player who is on track to return this week from his concussion in Alec Pierce. So, Alec Pierce, remind me what his straight prop is this week.
You get going. I'll grab that quick.
Okay.
I got it already. 34.5.
34.5. That's what I thought it was. I don't want to misquote it. Yeah. So this is a guy who his role, similar to Jamison Williams, is this downfield role, right? So I pulled this up, 34.5, right? Well, last year he had games of 125 yards, 134 yards, 81 yards, 74 yards, and 122 yards. So his prop bet is 34.5, and he might finish below that 60% of the time. But when he's going over, he's not getting 37 yards. He's not getting 41 yards where you're like, hey, we got the over. Yeah, this is a guy who they're using on downfield throws, and they're hitting him for these 100+ yard games, 300+ yard games last year, 5 games of 70+. And in this spot where the Raiders play a ton of cover 3, there's 2 factors here, right? One is with this cover 3 that the Raiders play, it opens up opportunities for somebody like Alec Pierce to get hit downfield. 2 is just the function of when you know what the defense is going to play, it's so much easier to scheme what you're going to do on offense, especially a coach like Shane Steichen. And then we do have, Michael Pittman limited today with a hamstring injury, which I didn't even see that news until after I threw this bet out there. But we have that little bit of an out right there where, Alec Pierce's snap count doesn't go up because he's on the field plenty. With Michael Pittman out, we probably get Adonai Mitchell coming in on the outside, and that becomes our 2 wide set. But now, what's your route tree for Alec Pierce? You still have the downfield work, but he's also going to be layered in for more of that short and intermediate work as well, which just gives you a higher chance of hitting to the upside. And so, it's one of those where we have some outs, but we don't actually need those outs in order to like this bet. So we talked about throwing the ladder on at 50, 60, and 70 yards, where we had plus 184 at 50, plus 279 at 60, plus 424 at 70. But again, keep in mind, we already threw out 3 games of 120 plus last year. So you can keep running this ladder up even higher with these sharper payouts and really make some money if Alec Pierce has one of those games this week in a spot against the Raiders where he's capable of having one of those types of games. So like this spot for Alec Pierce this week. Josh, you got anything to add to that one?
Yeah, no, just Mitchell's obviously in a tough spot after dropping that. Yeah, I haven't seen a game so impacted by a wide receiver in a long time. You get that drop of, I think he made a great play. I want to say it was like an 80-yard catch. He had a great spin move, kind of like a little whip route to get outside, ran down the sideline. You're so happy for the guy. Obviously had a little bit of a hard time so far getting out on the field and producing, but just those boneheaded plays, drops the ball right before he crosses the goal line. And if that wasn't bad enough, Jonathan Taylor had an amazing run where, Mitchell picks up a holding penalty, and it's just, you got to imagine with Pierce coming back that, even with Pittman out, it's not a situation where they're going to be shying away from Pierce at all.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, Pierce is their trusted guy, especially over Adonai Mitchell, who all the talent in the world, hopefully puts it together because he's fun to watch, but he's not going to be trusted, right? He's not the guy that they're going to say, hey, let's get, I mean, even last week when Pierce was out, it was whatever it was, 4 targets to Adonai Mitchell. It's like, let's just get him what we can get him. And so, yeah, this is the spot where Alec Pierce, even if Pittman plays, right, we just have a positive setup here. And if Pittman misses, then the run out really works in our favor. So, yeah, Alec Pierce run the rungs up the ladder. So yeah, I didn't even realize we hit both of those ladder bets last week from the show.
Yeah. You didn't get the full ladder. I want to say Quentin Johnson ended at 98 yards, so just 2 yards short of that 100. But we
that 100. Yeah. That 100 would have been a big difference for me in DFS too. That was that's the difference between second place and first place, or 30K in payout. But we'll take it. We'll take another good game from TJ there. Yeah. All right, cool. So, Josh, you got anything else to add before we get out of here?
No. Again, we're just, it hasn't been the best start to the season, but we feel really good in our process. And as we've been saying for a couple of weeks now, as we start to get these weeks under our belt, we get a little bit more information about, new coaching philosophies where coaches have changed teams, or just maybe different players and how they're going to play. And as we get deeper in the season, it becomes a lot easier of being able to take these stands and not just going off 2024 data and just a couple games this year. So the sample size gets a little bit bigger. We love big sample sizes. I think we're about 50 bets in right now. So, things are going to swing our way. We feel really glad. We have CFL still going. I think we're in week 17 of the CFL. Almost coming up to the playoffs there in the Canadian Football League, but we still have that going for anybody that is an NFL prop subscriber. CFL comes free, comes included. Bolter's been doing a great job there. We cannot say enough good things about him. We're really excited.
Yeah, I wanted to shout that out too. That just a reminder that with NFL, we're getting CFL and really profitable in that area so far this year. And so it's not about what sport you're betting, it's about where you're making money, right? It's about finding bets that are profitable plus EV and hitting those, and we can help you with that. So, looking forward to this week. Looking forward to this Thursday night game. We can watch Blake Corum go out there and make some money for us, and then get ready for Sunday. So, with that, we are going to get out of here. We will see you back here next Thursday, same time, 6 p.m. Eastern. We run this live on YouTube and X. You can watch it afterward, obviously, and get a look at our process, some of the bets that we're taking, but also how we're thinking through things and how that might set you up for any other bets that you're looking for that week. For Josh, I'm JM. We will see you on 1 week season throughout the weekend, and we will see you at the top of the props leaderboards on Sunday.